Hello, welcome to Grail Country. Let's see, why am I getting on this morning? Well, every once in a while, I have strange dreams. And recently, I've had like a series of strange dreams. Um, and I've been dreaming about being under demonic attack in my sleep. I'm always like saying prayers in my sleep against the demons, and then I'll wake up and usually feel like very ill at ease. Um, I um, it's been increasing recently, and then I had a dream uh, like that, and then when I woke up, I had a. I don't know if I always don't know. It's so hard to know how to describe these things because if I say voice, I don't want to give the impression that I heard a literal voice, but I had like something was telling me that I needed to take a look at Revelation chapter 9. And so I went and I looked at Revelation chapter 9. I knew that, I knew it was the fifth trumpet, but I wanted to take a closer look at the text and see like why it was being brought to my attention. And so I read the text, and then I went and grabbed some books off my bookshelf. I grabbed 3 books off my bookshelf. I grabbed M.L. Bach's The Apocalyptic of John, which we did a series on in Grail Country back in the early days. And I grabbed Sergei Bulgakov's Apocalypse of John, an essay in dogmatic interpretation. And I looked at both of those and looked at what both had to say about that particular part of Revelation, and both concurred that essentially it was about the dawning of an era of spiritual and psychological torment. I have a sense that because of some other things that I've been thinking about and reading lately, I have a sense that this is connected to artificial intelligence. I think that this is connected to the release of the demons from the pit that are described in the form of locusts in Revelation 9. I think that's what's going on. I have a friend of mine that's part of what we're doing here, who I also dreamed about, who I'm very concerned about. And I reached out to that person. I hope that they're doing okay. I had the sense that when I dreamed of them, I dreamed that they were also under attack. And so I was concerned about this person. And yeah. So anyway, the other book that I grabbed, though, and that's what I kind of got on the stream for. The other book that I grabbed was this Tomberg book that I had forgotten that I picked up. It's a little book. It's called Thy Kingdom Come. And it is, I was looking at it that night after I got up. And I went to the back cover and saw that the back, I don't know if I can get it up to the camera where you can see, but you'll just have to trust me. I don't know if I can get it to focus on that, but Michael Martin, my friend Michael Martin, actually did the back cover endorsement for this particular volume. And so the reason I think it's salient to that whole thing is that this book, Thy Kingdom Come, the subtitle is the evolution, the new evolution of the good. And in Tomberg, you encounter this idea vertical evolution and horizontal evolution. And so I think that this book for me is hopeful, right? Because that is like in the passage in Revelation, the time of torment is limited to 5 months. Now I wouldn't take that as literal 5 months. The point is that it's a limited duration. That divine mercy limits the duration of the torment that's caused by the release of those demonic forces. So and I think like that's because the counter forces of the vertical evolution are always also in operation. In Meditations on the Tarot, he describes the forces of vertical evolution as the cooperation for existence, as opposed to the struggle for existence that we see on the plane of horizontal evolution, which proceeds according to the principle of the serpent. I thought I would just go ahead and kind of like dive into this book with you. I was emailing my friend Jordan Daniel Wood last night, and I'm getting him a copy of this book as well. So I'm going to start reading it here on stream now, and I'm just going to read until if someone wants to get in here and talk with me. I've just as soon talk to a person as read a book, but I'll at least get started and give you a little taste of it before I drop the link. I'm going to go ahead and skip the foreword and just dive right into the text. It's divided into sections, so it's a very short book too. It's like an 80-page book. So it's not very long. So the first section is the kingdom of nature. The second section is the kingdom of man. The third section is the kingdom of God, and then there's a fourth section called the breath of life. And then there's a fifth section that is part of a separate unfinished essay called Natural and Supernatural, Images of the Holy Trinity. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive into part one of the text, Kingdom of Nature. Ever since the appearance of Charles Darwin's theory of natural evolution of species, the convictions of anyone with even a modicum of education have undergone radical change. Nature has not only come to be regarded primarily as an object of research and exploitation to be altered and shaped to our use, but it is increasingly deferred to as the sole source from which we might hope to discover the meaning of life, its goal, and even the foundations of morality. What the Bible meant for the Europeans of former days has been superseded by the implications of viewing nature as caught in the grip of evolution. This nature, conceived as evolving, is not the nature of our forefathers marveled at as God's creation. To their wondering, probing, poetic gaze, nature appeared as a finished work. Nowadays, however, most regard nature as a process, a ceaseless becoming, and not at all a perfected work. We are led to believe by such people that what we observe in nature are labor pangs pointing to a future we cannot even imagine, a future which in nothing will be left of what we know as nature, including even ourselves. We are to believe that the glory and perfection of nature lie not in her origin and past, but in her future. To be a devout evolutionist, and who is not these days, means to believe in the future and to deem inferior anything of the past. It means to believe in a wretched, soulless, spiritless past, somehow sprung from a blind, whirling mass of primeval gas, and in a brilliant future to be shaped and dominated by the reasoning faculty, ramped up to a degree we cannot presently conceive. If nature did evolve plants, animals, and man, not forgetting the poets and the sages among us, from a vortex of gas, why should we not turn to her and only her for instruction on the meaning of life and the guidelines of right aspiration, thinking, and behavior? Where better than from nature, that is, from life itself, can we hope to learn the real what, why, and how of life? And all the more so, we believe ourselves to be no more than fragments of nature, somehow grown fit for self-reflection. Untold numbers of our contemporaries think in just this way and consider it their bounden duty to apply lessons learned from nature as guiding principles for all their undertakings. Nature's teaching. The natural sciences have placed a great mass of factual information at our disposal, from which by analysis it has proven possible to draw general conclusions we might call nature's teachings. These teachings have been inferred from the scientific data in the same way evidentiary conclusions in jurisprudence are inferred from careful review of the facts of any given case. But even so, nature herself is not in the business of drawing conclusions about herself. Nature doesn't teach. She simply acts. Or perhaps better said, simply happens. We cannot deny, however, the significance of the implications of nature's happenings, which can speak volumes. For instance, the fact that dinosaurs once ruled the earth but then disappeared, giving way to weaker but more adaptable animals, is a happening in nature which teaches us that highly specialized creatures, those capable of realizing the highest degree of development in some particular niche, are the least suited for further development. Whereas less specialized creatures, those better able to adapt, although often weaker, are better able to survive and develop further owing to their more generalized capacities. That is, the one-sided development of a highly specialized creature proves to be an evolutionary dead end. It reaches the highest level of attainment, the world record, so to speak, in some particular direction, but by the same token forfeits the possibility of further development in any other direction. Since such a creature has need precisely of alternative directions of development in order to survive amid ever-changing conditions, and keeping step with the onward march of evolution, it perishes. The extinction of the dinosaurs, then, brings to light nature's teaching that specialization is a blind alley and spells ruin, whereas adaptability portends life and progress. As regards the continued existence or the extinction of species and the preservation or destruction of an individual within a species, the decisive factor is the fit. The decisive factor is that the fit are worth saving and the weak expendable and soon perish. For example, the battling stags in rutting season establishes among them the most fit and hence most deserving of siren young. And just as the struggle for survival determines which individuals within a species endure and which are rejected, so also do species as a whole struggle for existence in the natural world. We are told that there is afoot in nature a will to power, whose self-assertive goal is its own survival, as though nature were engaged in conjuring a prodigious creature adapted to meeting every challenge and overpowering every opponent, directing all its effort to producing this prodigy. Could this prodigy be man? Not yet, answered Friedrich Nietzsche. The man is only a stepping stone on the way to this being. In the end, man will be superseded in the order of nature's prodigious conjuration. The Superman, Übermensch, may be realized. For if man is part of nature, which has thus become self-conscious, the Superman, or the one who is coming, will not be nature grown self-conscious, but nature grown self-willed. Should this actually come to pass, the Delphic oracle, man, know thyself, will be replaced by the will oracle, man, will thyself. For the crown of natural evolution would then no longer be self-reflection, but self-actualization. Such coming ones would not merely recognize and acknowledge freedom, but actually be autonomous. Their willpower would be an inexhaustible font of creativity, untrammeled and unconditioned by anything other than itself. O thou, my will, my necessity, my law. Such was Nietzsche's prophetic cry, for he himself was well advanced on the path toward the secret of the will that operates in the evolutionary process of nature, slithering upward through the mutating forms of nature's successive kingdoms until it achieves consciousness and autonomy. It is the will below which smolders in the persuasive, compelling promise, "Ye shall be as gods." nature's other teaching. But wait, what happens in nature attests only to a struggle. What happens in nature attests only to a struggle for existence, assiduously selecting those fit to survive. It attests also a remarkable degree of cooperation, association, and social collectivism. Anthill and termite colony, wasp nest and beehive, wolf pack and elephant herd. Indeed, every living organism whose cells work together, every molecule of a healthy cell, every atom with its system of electrons are examples of cooperation, association, and social collectivism in nature. Electrons unite atoms, atoms in molecules, molecules in cells, cells in organisms, organisms in turn work in colonies, communities, herds, tribes, races, nations, governments, and confederations. The late Prime Minister of South Africa, General Smuts, was so struck by nature's collective activity that he not only elaborated a philosophy of holism, from the Greek holon, totality, but also, on holistic grounds, aligned his country with the British Commonwealth. It was for this reason that, not only in time of peace, but through both world wars, South Africa remained a faithful member of the Commonwealth and all the obligations this entailed. But General Smuts was not the only one in recent times so impressed by a comprehensive view of nature's integrative processes that he sought to apply them on the social political level. Over half a century earlier, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels had been entranced by the spectacle of the struggle for existence in nature, and how by alliance in groups and collectives the weaker amassed strength. Marx and Engels unleashed upon mankind the impassioned plea, "Workers of the world, unite." Their call to those oppressed in life's struggle for existence, a struggle that also plays out in human society, was a call to unite and take joint action against oppressors in the higher echelons, to shake off their rule, to replace competition and rivalry with a new worldwide social order founded on cooperation. They believed that such a communal society should have as little to do with exploiters and the exploited as does an ant colony, where no individual exploits or enslaves another, but each serves as part of the whole, never claiming a position of power or privilege for itself. To the thinking of Marx and Engels, what was instinctively realized in a colony of ants should be achievable in a communal society through reasoned conviction. They regarded reason as an instinct-grown consciousness. Instinct is the categorical expression of the essential nature of matter, and that constitutes all things. And matter, as in turn inhabited by a primal instinct, destined one day to rise resplendent, illuminating all things, to our, by then, fully evolved faculty of reason as a prodigious, all-embracing fund of knowledge. What is this primal instinct? Is it the urge for progress? Progress, not only for the few or the elect, but for all. And is this not precisely the instinct for progress that smolders in the depths of evolution's promise? Ye shall be as gods. Note well, the promise is not you or he shall be as a god. Being as gods is a concern of mankind as a whole. As such, according to this view, it represents a collective goal. The serpent's cunning. If we now broaden our focus, we may equally well take as natural scientific conception the evolution in its entirety as itself a single large-scale happening in nature. If we do this, we discover that its teaching is pointing to an indefatigable driving force active in the depths of all becoming. It is the force that adopts, then discards myriad forms, striving always to rise from dark instinct into the clear light of reason. Understood in this sense, evolution is synonymous with instinct striving to become reason. This process does not proceed in a straightforward way, but by trial and error. It tests and probes, takes byways, wanders down blind alleys. When it does these things, it is seeking a way out in order to resume its primary direction. It follows a winding path, like the track of a serpent slithering through darkness. Nonetheless, that track does indicate a general direction in which the movement takes place one progressing toward organic forms capable of reason. All right. I am going to pause for a minute because my nose is running, and I will be right back. And I will drop the link and see if anybody wants to join me after reading that opening section. I just want to point out for those, I know where Tomberg's headed because I've read a lot of Tomberg before. He is very much going to, he's a very committed anti-Marxist. He was actually part of the loyalist forces that fought against the Bolsheviks. He is going to be working toward overturning this. He still will keep the idea of cooperation of existence as representative of the vertical principle of evolution, but he is going to place that in a non-materialistic reading versus the materialistic evolutionary reading of Marx. I will be right back. Yeah. I'm dropping the link now. I forgot to do it first. There we go. And I'll just read a little bit more while I wait and see if anybody wants to pop in and talk. All right. So that was the end of a paragraph. Let's see. It may be instructive at this point to note the peculiar role indigenous peoples and others also have attributed to the serpent. So now he's talking mythology and the mythological role of the serpent. Several years ago in the 1960s, the British television network broadcast the first documentary of the rights of the Australian Aborigines. It was produced and narrated by David Attenborough, a depth psychologist with special interest in the mysteries of so-called primitive peoples. These Aborigines made an exception in the case of this congenial and sympathetic man, according to him a high honor of allowing him to attend their rites. Nor did he betray their trust, for the film he produced, as a result, offered profound insights that could not do otherwise than awaken in the viewer respect for the childlike gravity with which this small group of our fellow men, poor and naked though they were, enacted the deepest reverence they enacted in deepest reverence what they hold most sacred. The primary rite, a presentation in dramatic form of their central tradition, was intended to evoke the primordial memory subsisting in their subconscious of the origin and evolution of consciousness. A man, evidently in a trance in which he had identified himself with a serpent, crept out through a cleft in the rock and, swaying rhythmically, slowly approached a group of his fellows in the foreground. Upon reaching them, he emerged from the trance and collapsed, after which he came to himself and rose up as a man among men. At the back of the grotto, a slab of wood inscribed with symbols depicted the serpent's journey from the dark depths of matter into the stature of a man. This wooden book of symbols was then displayed to all present. In her major opus, The Secret Doctrine, H.P. Blavatsky presented many Indian and Tibetan traditions concerning the serpent and the sons of the serpent. These traditions show that in those regions, the serpent was regarded as the originator and teacher of civilization, of the arts and sciences, of invention and the use of tools. The message of these traditions was that the Nagas, the sons of the serpent, were mankind's first teachers, that the serpent was the principle of intellect and material progress. For their part, the Gnostic sects of the Essenes, from Naas or Nahash, serpent in Hebrew, and the Ophites from Ophis, serpent in Greek, worship the serpent as the cosmic principle of progress. They took as their symbol the serpent swallowing its tail, the same chosen by the Theosophical Society as its seal and standard. All right, so I'm going to stop. I'll stop reading there. I'll pick this up another time, and I will be doing a conversation on it with Jordan. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this book. But Michael has asked for more for Bach's interpretation of Revelation chapter 9, so I will go and grab that. I'll also share Bulgakov's. I happen to have them both by. Okay, so let's start with Emil Bach's. So look at the contents. Page 68 looks like where it starts. Okay. Let's see. I'm just going to start. This is close. I'm just going to start here, where he's talking more generally about the seven trumpets in general here. But I'll just read from here to the end is where he's going to end up hitting on the fifth and sixth trumpets. So he says here, the cycle of seven trumpets reveals a principle of evolution, which we can recognize. Well, there we go. Reveals the principle of evolution, which we can recognize in the large as well as the small cycles of human history. Our present small cycle began at the end of the Middle Ages. We can attempt to understand the revelation of the series of trumpet blasts which have followed with each other in this epoch from the consciousness of the angel who celebrated at the heavenly altar and refused the subsequent events by pouring out fire. And released the subsequent events by pouring out fire. As said before, the Archangel Michael is obviously hidden behind this angel. He drives forward the wheel of history and is concerned to see that the humanity of the future should voluntarily assimilate the forces of heaven, which will bestow on it its new faculties and organs. This ties directly into my intuition about AI, because I think that's what the way that we're interacting with AI is an invitation of the demons from the pit. That's what it is. And so, but I think this is why I look forward to getting Vlad into conversation with someone with more technical expertise, because I think essentially what Vlad's impulse is to try to. Oh, Dave's here. Hey, hello, Dave. Let me just see for Michael's sake if I can find. Let me just get to the section of Bach that Michael was asking about, and then we can talk. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see. He drives forward the wheel of history and is concerned to see that this humanity of the future should voluntarily assimilate the forces of heaven and will bestow on it new faculties and organs. So cooperation with heaven and the angels instead of allowing ourselves to get caught up with the demonic AI. He is anxious that human beings should be able to receive and thus use for their good what is intended for them. Are not the blast of the trumpets also warnings and admonitions of Michael? In the age of the conscious soul, this would be the age of the consciousness soul here. Think about this in Bartfieldian terms. What he's pointing out is that we are no longer in the age of original participation, and we have a very highly developed self-consciousness. And so that means that our pathways are different. That's one of the reasons. I've said this for years and no one listens to me, but one of the things that drives all forms of woke is a desire to return to original participation. But we can't return to original participation. The gates of Eden are barred by a fiery sword. That can't happen. So it's a false awakening because it's not actually possible. So anyway, let's see here. He is anxious that human beings should be able to receive and to use for their good what is intended for them. Are then the blast of the trumpets also the warnings and admonitions of Michael? In the age of the consciousness soul, heaven draws the attention of human souls through the trumpet blast to the dangers which are inherent in the necessity of the progress of civilization. Since the beginning of the 15th century, European humanity has awakened to the clear perception through the senses of material objects. With this awakening, a new enthusiasm for thinking has been born. Delighted with their discoveries, human beings have looked around them with new eyes. They really began to perceive the earth itself for the first time. It has been an age in which the character of the first trumpet attested itself. The icy hailstones of dead thought have been mingled with burning enthusiasm for the new science and philosophy. In the physical world, fire and hail do not mix. The spiritual picture points to the danger which threatens all enthusiasm, which is only directed toward earthly matters. It is inevitable that cold rationalism and calculations of earthly profit should be mixed with it. So all enthusiasm which does not embrace the opened worlds of spirit must one day fail and in the end disappear. And end in disappointment. Excuse me. The text is really small in this book. Sorry, guys. A second phase of recent history has produced astonishing. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can skip ahead to the actual fifth trumpet here. He's still talking about what the trumpets represent in general. Okay. Okay, here we go. Then came the days when, for the generation which was becoming increasingly clever, the glory of the sun, moon, and stars was extinguished. So the sun, moon, and stars were once seen as basically as living beings, and as moderns, we no longer see them that way. In the past, the lights of heaven had stimulated a feeling of the unseen world. But as cleverness took more and more possession of the human soul, the last organs and capacities for supersensible perception of the universe died away. Then came a time when the bottomless pit reacted on the new soul. This is the fifth trumpet right here. Then came a time when the bottomless pit reacted on the soul forces of humanity, when the depths sizzled and bubbled as if drops of water had fallen on hot iron. The spectral world of abstractions poisoned the 19th century. Through materialistic thinking, man evoked forces of destruction, which began to eat up his own life forces, just as when swarms of locusts descend upon the verdant life of the countryside. At the present time, and he wrote this in the 40s, we are approaching the sounding of the sixth trumpet. All this must be lived through, even the change of the locust swarms of the fifth trumpet into spectral war horses. So Bach actually associates the fifth trumpet with the forces of basically the peak of with peak modernity in the 19th century, but we didn't perceive it. We didn't perceive it in that way. So I think what's happening now is still associated with the fifth trumpet, but it's in a mode where I think at least some of us will be able to perceive the malevolence. So let me go to Bulgakov because I also promised that really quick. That his is shorter.
Nate, can I introduce an element to it? Well,
go for it. Yeah, while I'm looking for Bulgakov, go for it. Yeah, not dead air where I'm looking.
So in Jewish thinking, there are events that are tied to specific feasts. So the Feast of Trumpets, and trumpets is the beginning of the days of awe, which is in Judaism believed that books are opened, the book of life, and you're hoping your name is going to be written in the book of life. And the trumpet is a call for repentance. It's your last opportunity to repent, leading up to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This is lined up in Jewish thinking. The reading that you do on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is like the first real day, is the binding of Isaac. And I wanted to bring that in because I know you're interested in the scapegoat mechanism and everything else.
Yeah.
The idea that the Day of Judgment, the Feast of Trumpets, and the day that, again, even in Jewish thinking, it's the binding of Isaac, not the sacrificing of Isaac, because he's never sacrificed, but he is bound.
Right.
I think as you're talking about which kingdom we're following, it seems like there's something to this, like a connection to the proper sacrifice versus.
Yeah. Well, actually, yes, because here's the thing. You're really hitting into something very deep here, right? And I'll tell you why. Because the proper idea of sacrifice is actually tied directly to the proper notion of identity.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that I'm critiquing are both like movements of identity that see themselves in competition with other identities and want to increase the power of the identity that they're associated with. That's what's going on in the things that I'm critiquing, regardless of what flavor. That's what's going on with woke left. That's what's going on with woke right. They're both politics of identity, and they're politics of identity that are based in a war against all other identities, right?
No.
So, so clearly there's always been an association in Christian thinking between the binding of Isaac and the ultimate and Christ's ultimate sacrifice. Proper.
Yeah, and that's part of what's fascinating too, is that the day of judgment, the binding is when the son is not sacrificed, but instead the ram.
Right. And so the best way I can make as succinct. So what we need is so what Christ is pointing toward is the identity that it's not in competition with other identities. It is the identity whose very identity is unity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that it is love and not power.
Mm-hmm.
And that love is ultimately is actually what creates everything, not power. Love creates the universe, not power. And so, so that's, I mean, this is why there's no good reading of Nietzsche. There just isn't. Like, it's like there's no he really is projecting the spirit of Antichrist out into the world, and it takes various forms, and that's why I care about that stuff, and that's why I take the risk that I do to speak the way that I do about it.
Nate, Nate, the other thing. So as I said, there's what is celebrated in the feasts is lining up several events, and it's the binding of Isaac, but it's also the creation of Adam and Eve.
There you go.
So when you're saying it's
about
the creation of the world.
In the text I was reading from Tomberg, it's like the reason he's going into the serpent mythology, he's wanting to show you the way in which the serpent is directly connected with our fall into consciousness.
Yeah.
And but the thing is like God is trying to redeem that.
So strange. Yeah.
The path of self-sacrifice is the way it's redeemed.
So the word for wise to describe the snake is the Hebrew word conveys the notion of naked.
Yeah.
It is, so the nakedness and so the fall and wisdom are tied together even in the idea. you can even picture it just like visually, that the serpent, it has no hair, right? It's the most naked animal. It sheds its skin. It's the most naked, and it makes them aware of their nakedness.
Right. Well, also the reason it's important to think about these things in terms of evolution, right? Like evolution of consciousness, is that the fall, in addition to being the fall into consciousness, is also the fall into process.
Right.
And the process that we're falling into is our own making.
Yeah.
Right. And it is like, and what actually accomplishes it and finishes it is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah. I just wanted to share what Bulgakov had to say really quick because I promised I would. It's very short. He's talking about Revelation 9, the fifth trumpet. The common meaning of these images is sufficiently clear. The active interference of demonic powers in human life. Mm-hmm. Providentially permitted, yet limited by divine providence. That's it. He doesn't like. He says that he says beyond that, beyond the common meaning, in terms of a more specific interpretation, Bulgakov says that's open to some future age, potentially, but not to us. So,
the other thing I wanted to bring up, hear your thoughts on, is I was actually part of an intentional Christian community back in the day. And people jokingly would call it Christian communism when trying to explain it to people. And sure. I got in the habit of saying, no, we're actually a constitutional monarchy. Said God, Jesus is the king,
right? And Christ is there, yeah.
And Deuteronomy is the Constitution. Yeah. That's the idea. And some people like that, some people didn't. But there was a couple of people that actually were quote unquote Christian communists, and they really struggled with the communal living. It's actually terrible. They were bad roommates, and I read this book that really affected me, and it had such a limited run. It was a book from a doctor that was a missionary in China. And part of what he was getting at was that they would see people trying to share their resources, and the Christian community in China was actually doing it. Mm-hmm. They were being communist, quote unquote. They were able to unify and share and to take care of each other in a way that could not be done if you removed Christ as king.
Right. Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, yeah, of course it can't. Like, it's different too, though, because like, what the problem with communism isn't the communal sharing. That's not what's wrong with communism. If people think that that's what's wrong with communism, they have a really screwed up view of the world. That's not what's wrong with communism. What's wrong with communism is that it gets people to do that through state coercion. That's what's wrong. That's what's wrong with communism.
Is that it's the situation where everyone has to be playing the same game.
Right.
People aren't.
We would hope that as Christians, more and more Christians form communities where they do that voluntarily, because it's a godly way to live.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing, is that the communists even said that. They're like, you saying that in order to get people to actually follow this, we have to believe in your stupid God. Like, it was
right.
Because they just couldn't wrap their heads around, because at certain points, there's different levels of persecution that the church went through. And at some points, the communists actually were like, okay, how do we learn how you guys were actually able to share? And they're like, we don't, just people believe in this stuff. And if they actually believe in it, then they share.
Yeah. While I have you on here, I just wanted to express my appreciation for you, Dave. You always express great judgment and wisdom. Even when I'm disagreeing with you with what you have to say, I can see why you're saying what you're saying. And I think that you have you always have good reasons, and you're always speaking truth as far as you can see.
Thank you,
And
buddy.
I always appreciate your contributions.
Now I'm wondering what thing you're talking about in particular. Is
No,
this
I'm
because
just
the
saying, like in general, I think like most of the time I agree with you, but like sometimes, I mean, you don't always agree with everybody.
No,
Yeah. You're always going to have something. Like there's nobody you agree with 100% of the time. So
I watched your the temple talk that you sent me as well. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Because you sent it to me, I went through all of Deuteronomy this week. I read all of Deuteronomy. Well, because to what extent is there a distinction? Right. To what extent is there occurring, right? Because she's very much in the Deuteronomist, the belief in the Deuteronomist.
Yeah. Joseph hates her so much. He hates her. Like he just thinks she's a trash scholar. Yeah. He's like she gets the Hebrew wrong all the time, and it's like I'm not in any. So the reason I like her is because I already long before I read Margaret Barker, I already had intuitions that were in a similar direction to Margaret Barker for completely different reasons. So it was easy for me to the pattern that she was laying out was one I'd already intuited and sensed on my own. So it was easy. Right. So I don't read Barker with the same critical eye that Joseph does. So she may be in fact a trash scholar, and maybe she's got good intuitions and bad scholarship. I don't know. I just know that I find her. I see some of the same patterns. Like it's interesting. In fact, okay, Jacob is blocking me, and we're no. I think he stopped calling me a friend, and but I noticed something the other day that I hadn't noticed before. And you'll understand what I mean because you just were listening to the Barker material recently. It's very interesting to me that Jacob, who one of the insults he likes to hurl at me is a love idolater. Mm-hmm. His icon on Discord for himself is a heart with a fountain at the center. So it's like some part of Jacob somewhere sees what I'm talking about, understands what I'm talking about at a level that's not in its conscious mind yet.
It is interesting. There's a couple of scholars where it's not an agreeing or a disagreeing. It's an engaging with a topic that you don't hear other people engaging in. And so I found a lot of what she was saying very interesting, but partially part of it is, I get to actually have an intellectual conversation with someone is how it felt. I can engage in topics that I'm very, very concerned with as someone who practices. I read Leviticus every single year on Yom Kippur, right? But I also read Revelation.
Yeah, you seem to have the same intuition that somehow that there's an underlying unity.
Yes.
Of the Christian and Jewish traditions that most people aren't seeing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the mystical content is the place to look for that unity.
Right.
Because it's the mystical content that is trying to express in our limited human capacity the best that we can the direct experience of the divine.
Right.
So, and Barker is not a mystic; she's a scholar. Right. But the things that she is uncovering come from the mystic traditions, and are very much. I see them. I mean, and I see them because of my own mystical bent and orientation and constant work with mysticism and symbols. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. I'm
here we go. CWX says it's the primordial Hebraic tradition.
So
right. So wait a minute here. This is actually really good because if in fact Christ is a completion of what begun with Adam, then what Christ is talking about would have to be echoed within the primordial Hebraic tradition. Because Christ completes the role of high priest that was intended for Adam.
Right. And so, like, I believe that the day of judgment will be related, like Christ's second coming will be related on the calendar, will be related to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
In the same way that on the calendar, his death overlaps with Passover.
So let's I think this is a good moment to like kind of like stick our toe into the unfortunate political aspect of this for a moment.
Fun.
Yeah. No, because I want to ask you, I'm gonna come about the political from a theological angle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you, as a Christian who shares with me this intuition about somehow like there's a deeper connection between Judaism and Christianity than most people want to see, right? What do you think God's intention in having the church and the Jewish tradition and the state of Israel continuing to exist as separate entities within history? What do you think that is moving toward?
Yeah, it's a very.
And if you don't, and I don't know is an acceptable answer.
I'm really processing a lot of that, because it has a long history, right? Even there was a group of, I think, Mennonites that at one period of time thought that if you like, they wanted to learn Hebrew because they thought that was the language you just spoke when you spoke in tongues, and they thought that infants, if you taught them no language, would know Hebrew. Where there's the jealousy that the church provokes in Israel. Mm-hmm. I have been wondering if part of it is actually that we don't understand the Jewish traditions by which we're connected to.
We don't at all.
So we piss them off when we talk about it.
Yeah, because we're ignorant. Okay, let's be the average level. First of all, let's be honest with ourselves about something. If you want to just like the average level of like of the religious understanding of a religious Jew, not secular Jews and secular Christians, don't know anything, equally don't know anything, but the average religious Jew has far more depth of understanding than the average very religious Christian. Yeah. They just do. Yeah, they just do. With the possible exception of there are certain Protestants who know so much Bible that it's just astounding.
Right. I think part of the issue in my mind is actually because the Jewish grounding is in narrative, not in like Paul is the closest to theology you actually get in the New Testament, where it's just like these are the theology, and so Christians instead are very, very focused on breaking down the exact wording of Paul into philosophical treatises, what this means for salvation, all these other things, but they're not thinking of it in story form. Whereas the biblical foundations are actually narrative. Like even the idea that God's law is written on our heart, the Torah written on our heart. Like if you open the Torah thinking it's going to be law, right? You read all of Genesis and you're like, there's 2 rules? Don't drink blood, don't murder, and circumcise on the 8th day. How is this like 50 chapters? That's what I get for rules? What I get for law? Sorry.
Yeah. And why so many stories about people and flawed people?
Right. And
that's an interesting thing too. It's like why is it not like, it's interesting. It's like, I don't know why so many people read the Bible assuming that everything that the Bible voices it endorses.
Right.
Like the Bible has multiple voices saying contradictory things for a reason. It's like, it's not like there are contradictions in the Bible, but the contradictions are representing different perspectives.
Right. So what I would say, and I think this is a season of my life that I've been focusing on something in particular, and I think it overlaps with what we're talking about here, is reassessing Judges as something deeply true for right now, but for reasons people don't agree with. So for me, so Judges gets used for manifest destiny, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I actually think that that's true in the opposite way.
Okay.
Because what I mean by that is that for me, when I read Judges is them taking over the land, but exposing, essentially, for lack of a better term, the original sin that will lead to everything falling apart. And I do think that that's actually pretty good document to understand manifest destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that explains all of the issues that are occurring.
Well, right. Yeah, well, I think lots of places, right? I mean, that's like manifest destiny is actually kind of that explains that is a lot that is tied up with what I was talking about earlier with like this need to promote the interest of my group identity in competition with other groups' identities. Like manifest destiny is like it is a aggressive expression of that.
Right. And the ending of Deuteronomy, the ending of Joshua reiterates the same idea, which is you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to make mistakes and it's all going to go bad. And the people are like, we got no other option though. We're doing this. Like we're signing on. We don't care. And the prophet, says to the people that basically you're going to fail upward, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're going to be brought to the place you need to be by God. And so ultimately it's not going to be by us. It's going to be by God. So even in how we understand, like politically, I understand Israel and I think I support it in some ways, but it appears to me entirely as a kingdom of this world. And I would let me tell you, if Israeli soldiers marched around Gaza 7 times, blew trumpets, and then a miracle happened, but the end of that miracle was that they slaughtered everyone there, I wouldn't say peep about it. Mm-hmm. I'd say, well, I guess that was what they were supposed to do, right? But which is difficult for me because I'm like,
well, I think okay. So I think there's definitely I don't yeah. I think it's pretty clear. I'm very pro-Israel, but I would not make the argument that Israel is not a nation of the world,
right?
In its current iteration, it is not. And I think as long as the church and Israel are separate things, and Christianity and Judaism are not together, there can't be any messianic Israel.
Right. Well, so that's what I mean is that I don't see within that. I believe we are fulfilling something, but accidentally we're fulfilling it. We're not in the intentional.
Here's what I think, though. I actually think that the Jews being back in the land is a good thing, even though it's not the perfect. It's not the perfect thing.
Yeah.
But it is the good thing, and it actually that it happened in history is somewhat miraculous.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's not.
So it's not. It is not the fulfillment of the will of God entirely, but it is certainly a God-ordained happening within history.
Yeah. How did this happen? What is going on?
Right. And if you are a nation among nations, it's very interesting because what I see Christians doing is asking Israel to be better Christians than we are.
Right.
That's essentially what's going on. like you have Christians in the West that are against the Israeli government, basically denying the realities of the game that exists between the nations.
Right. Right.
Like the reality of the game that exists between the nations is that sometimes, especially in a nation like Israel, that essentially actually has the entire world against its existence at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to act in its self-preservation interests.
Yeah.
And that means fighting wars against its enemies. And when you're fighting an enemy that is willing to sacrifice its own children rather than surrender, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like what? I mean, that's what else is Israel supposed to do? Like that is the question that I've just have never heard. And it seems to me the answer is we want Israel to do the Christian thing and be better Christians than we want those Jews in Israel to be better Christians than we are. We want them to actually accept and embrace their own annihilation for the sake of peace.
Right.
We wouldn't ask that. We wouldn't dare to ask that of any other nation on earth.
What was the original question?
It's all part of the same question, though.
Yeah.
Because who drives that evil game that's played amongst the nations? It's the principalities and powers.
Right.
Like that's it. It's like, but people still live in nations and still have lives, and that they wish to preserve and continue, and the world is still fallen.
Well, and it is a strange thing, because I do think that some of the things that Israel does in war are the things that you would imagine someone would do if they were reading the same Bible as us. What I mean by that is, like, if you were going to bomb someplace, sending a bunch of notes the day before, dropping notes the first day and saying, we are going to bomb this place.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that's what I'm saying. Well, yes, that's like any honest analysis of what's going on in Gaza reveals that the like in the history of urban warfare, this is the lowest civilian casualty rate in the history of urban warfare. And yes, the images of starving children are absolutely horrible, and they break my heart too. But since when in the history of warfare is it the job of you to provide for the logistics of your adversary?
Well, and it also it's reminded me of Exodus. I'm going through Exodus right now in one of the many Bible studies I'm a part of. But one of them, we're going through Exodus, and God says, tomorrow there's hail coming. And you can bring all your animals in from the field, and you can bring all your people in. And some of the Egyptians listen, and their cattle aren't killed by the hail because they're warned in advance to keep them safe, right? There are non-Jews who practice the Passover and are spared.
Let's see here. Nate, I love you. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You seem to be working from a base that prior that citizens of modern Israel are more valuable than people who were displaced, so they could take over. No, I'm telling you that the reality is that it's a sovereign nation that has been in existence for some time now, and has the right to defend itself. I see you're making this like, but they're all colonists argument. If we start playing that game, then nobody has the right to their land, and we're all screwed. So the political reality is that the nation of Israel exists. It came to exist in history. I think to just reduce it to this simple leftist oppressor-oppressed narrative is not to fully understand the complexities of the situation, and I'm not going to buy into that. So,
yeah,
we're all oppressors and oppressed. That's the reality.
Yeah. And
that's why that narrative is bullshit.
And we find ourselves in a time.
Yeah, exactly.
We are right now. And so we have to act based on how things currently are.
Yeah. Right. And in the current situation where Israel is a nation among the nations, and I'm not, and that's the only status I'm claiming for it. I'm not claiming any special status for it other than a nation amongst a nation. I'm just saying that it is a nation amongst a nation. It happens to be a nation that is that has values that are similar to ours.
Right.
It is a Western, liberal, democratic country that has similar values to us. It's Jewish. We're still mostly Christian, really, honestly, despite all of the hand wringing about the death of Christendom. We are still identifiably a very Christian nation on the whole.
Well, another part that makes it a good comparison is that so many of the Jews in Israel are actually secular Jews, and so many of the Christians are secular Christians.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, exactly right.
Because no one says secular
because
Christian.
Secularity is super Christian.
Yeah. No. But what I mean is, everyone understands if I say secular Jew. Yeah, everyone understands that demographic. But we don't call our atheists secular Christians. We call them atheists. You're Jewish atheists. Yeah, you're
secular Jew is actually a little weirder because Judaism is very different from Christianity. That's one of the things that, like, when people say, "Well, I'm just anti-Zionist. I'm not anti-Semitic." When you say that, you show a complete lack of understanding about what Judaism is, because Judaism isn't just a religion in the way that, say, your Methodism is, or your Pentecostalism is. No. It is a complete civilizational, cultural system, and it has a deep tie to that land. Yeah. You can't just neatly say, well, I'm okay with Jews, but I hate Zionism. It doesn't really work that way. And also, in reality, anti-Zionist sentiments always spill out into acts of violence against Jews in the streets.
Now, Nate, we have been blessed on the Sabbath to have a man with Jewish ancestry here. Someone who comes from a line of non-practicing Jews, one might say.
This is true.
Welcome, Paul.
I don't have much time, but I just have to say, Nate, in many ways, you are the true image of an anarchist to me, because I can absolutely never figure you out.
Beard.
I don't. Well, yeah, that's funny to say that when I'm at the most in contradiction with my idealistic anarchist principles. And consciously aware of the contradiction, but sometimes idealistic principles have to be overridden by the realities of the world,
which I would imagine is the true spirit of rather non-ideological anarchism.
Yeah.
And your point just a minute ago about, we are living in such a weird age because, of course, this war isn't exactly a war against two nations, because the weirdness that Gaza is, so many of the categories that we use for our moral math are completely disrupted. And in this particular conflict, it's just weird on so many levels. And the weirdness is also as you just said, with respect to, what is Judaism today? Is it a religion? Because you're right. It is a total, they have secular law. And one of the conversations I've wanted to have with Hezi has been, just consider, say, banning bacon from the nation state of Israel. When you think about that, it just scrambles your brain in terms of how historical categories have worked and how we are now in a period where I mean, even sort of the nation state, which has been the dominant paradigm in modernity, is really breaking down. And the assumption was that, well, multinational corporations, they're going to sort of displace nation states, and in some ways they have disrupted them, but still no, because globalism too is sort of shaking.
Yeah,
I
very
mean,
much so.
everything is just, I mean, we are living in the strangest world.
It is. I mean, the times are apocalyptic. Like in some sense of the word, they are, because the world that we knew for so long is going away at a very rapid pace. And so I think, like, my basic instinct here is I think we should try to slow that transition as much as possible, because when those transitions happen suddenly and violently, they tend to be catastrophic.
Well,
so
it's
basically that's why I'm standing where I am. It's like slow down, back up. Like, maybe I'm not saying that we don't need to get past. Maybe we do need to get past liberalism and modernity, but there are things from them that we need to integrate before we move past them, because not everything about them was bad.
So there's a passage that Jacob quotes often where he speaks. It's in Zechariah where 10 men grab hold of a Jew and say, "Teach me about your God."
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's interesting because that section is about the Messianic age, and that has never happened in history except now. Right? Is if you're in the year 900, were there Christians seeking Jews to understand them and to learn about their God? Right?
Right? Yeah, that's it. That's it. And it's
this is the second part, because I've pushed Jacob on this element. The reason why the Goy are doing that is because of Jesus of Nazareth. So it is.
Not only that, Dave. Let's be real about the history here. The history is that we were in the synagogues at first,
right?
And then then we were not in the synagogues, and that really, the second century is when that really started in earnest, and it was because the early Christians were Christian anarchists, basically. And they refused to fight in the Bar Kokhba revolt. Like, that was the last straw that really led to the final expulsion of Christians from the synagogues. And there were lots of terrible things said, even from the earliest days, back and forth, as the identities were defining themselves against one another. But that comes back to this whole question of, like, okay, like, if we are working identity in a way that only puts us in conflicts with other identities, we're doing something wrong. Because that, like, the whole idea of identity in Christ that we are supposed to be striving towards in Christians is not that. It's specifically not that kind of identity.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why St. Paul says that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female.
Right.
Because it's not that it's not that you stop being a Jew, or you stop being a Greek, or you stop being a man, or you stop being a woman. Right. But that identity is no longer in conflict with.
Right. I heard someone phrasing it before, the notion of being grafted into the tree of Israel.
Yeah.
If you take a Macintosh apple branch and you graft it into a different apple tree because it has deeper roots, that branch continues to make Macintosh apples. It does not make the apples of what it is now grafted into.
Right.
So the Gentiles do not produce Jewish fruit. They continue to exist as Gentiles, now with the root system of Israel.
Yeah. And I think that root system is what we've been ignoring.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're both aligned on that for sure. I just want to address this really quick. Like, Trump may be coming to his senses of cutting off Netanyahu. Like, first of all, I'm not a big fan of Netanyahu. I still support Israel, but let me say this: if the United States, nothing would disturb me more than to see the United States withdraw its support for Israel, because that would lead to terrible outcome. That would lead to terrible outcome, because the reality is that without U.S. support, if we really, really completely isolate ourselves from Israel, then Israel will by attrition be overcome, unless God actually intervenes to save them. I had an interesting exchange with Yosef the other day. Well, he was telling me about the history of rabbinic commentary on alien life. I was talking about about rabbis who talked about about aliens coming to help and fight alongside the Jews. So I said, and I joked with him. I said, the way things are trending, you might need the aliens.
Yeah. When, according to these books that you were reading, I have to go soon. When is the seventh trumpet supposed to come?
Well, neither Bach. So Bach and Bulgakov both read. They don't read them the way that they don't read them the way that the dispensationalist Pentecostal, the tradition I was raised in, would. Right? They're not trying to decode when in history is this going to happen. They actually read it as describing things that happen within the cycles of history.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would say that the seventh trumpet for both represents the full arrival of the spiritual world entire.
Yeah.
So that we would no longer be able to continue under the illusion that we are in presently. Yeah. We would no longer be like the spiritual world would be fully present to us in a way that allows us to no longer deny it. So because the arrival, for both Christ arrives not just the second coming is not just the arrival of Christ, but it's the arrival of Christ along with the entire spiritual world, which is what the marriage of heaven and earth ultimately represents. We are no longer, there's no longer any disconnect between us and the spiritual world.
I'm processing things poetically right now in my mind and not logically, because I'm going back to the snake and the image of a snake losing its skin, shedding its skin, that's the creature that makes us aware of our nakedness. Right. That nakedness is related to wisdom somehow. So nakedness, seeing things as they truly are, not with a covering, right? Mm-hmm. Is wisdom.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So to strip the layers, to make it naked, to make it plain, but then that's also in the text related to him being smooth, like a liar, like a trickster. Is we still use that expression? Smooth, like a smooth criminal. That guy's slick, and that Jacob.
Well, and also, well, that's interesting that you say smooth, right? Because you have in Plato, you have the Platonic dialogue discussion of the confusion between the smooth and the beautiful. So the beautiful, if you think of the beautiful as the image of the real, right?
Right.
That the creation as God intended is the beautiful, and the smooth that's the illusion that's presented to us to take instead.
Yeah.
And the surface of the apple is very smooth and shiny.
Yes. Well, if you take it as an apple.
If you take it as an apple.
Other options. Yeah.
Many other options.
Most of them are smooth, though. But then again, also that Israel is identified. It's a different word for smooth, but I am a smooth man, and so he covers himself within the garments of skin to look like Adam, because Edom and Adam is the same name, right?
Gotcha.
In Hebrew, Aleph,
Right.
Dalet, Mem. Okay, I can't do any more.
Yeah, no problem, David. It was good talking to you. I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, I just wanted to get on for a bit. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thanks for joining me, folks. Appreciate it. Talk to y'all later.
Fine.